On the first Sunday in December 1941, Americans were doing what Americans did on any normal Sunday.
I'd been to see another string of interminable westerns at the Plaza, which we went every Saturday and Sunday, and Guns of the Pecos was the movie that was playing.
My father and I were in the living room listening to the Giants football game. My father was sitting next to me suddenly when they announced that Pearl Harbor was attacked.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor by air.
I came home to a household that was somber and quiet, and the radio was on, and was told that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, which I had no idea where it was. I'll tell you what struck my mind. I thought it was somewhere in Oregon.
Soon every American would know that over 2,000 of their countrymen had perished in the Japanese attack on Hawaii's Pearl Harbor, and that nearly half the U.S. fleet had been destroyed.
Well, it was absolute horror. People were just shocked. When it happens, you don't know what to think. You're just standing there wondering, what happens now?
And it was terrifying. We sat down and looked at each other for a couple of minutes, and Max said, "No more civilian clothes." It was a very bad time.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
President Roosevelt told an America shocked out of its isolation and innocence that in order to win this war, every man, woman, and child would have to become part of the fight.
Never before have we been called upon for such a prodigious effort. Never before have we had so little time in which to do so much.
We may forget at the end of the century that America in the early 1940s was far from a superpower. Its army was ranked 19th in the world, behind Holland and Portugal. Its industry was still in the grip of a lingering depression. The war, of course, would change all that and many other things as well. It would unite the country in a way never known before or since. To understand the American home front during the war years, you have to understand the texture of the times, a time so naive that most Americans didn't know their president couldn't walk. Certainly a time before television and instant satellite transmission, when war news took days or weeks to reach newspapers and the newsreels. The survival of democracy was by no means assured.
I remember as a young boy, fear of the Japanese, that submarines were going to come up in Santa Monica, and there was a lot of fear then.
Just 4 days after the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy declared war on the United States.
The world was a very dark place. The German U-boats were sinking tankers right off the coast of Florida and New Jersey, within sight of bathers on the beach.
The oceans, which had historically kept America invulnerable, had been penetrated by enemies from both east and west.
We had to destroy those people to save ourselves and to save the United States. Then we all rushed off to the recruiting stations. Everybody I knew who was my age or close to it was in the services. If you were brave, you were in the Marine Corps. Everybody was in one thing or another, and almost all of us were in the Army. The Axis had to be defeated. And we knew that nobody was going to do it except us.
Yeah, my father went to war, and he was managed a little grocery store, IGA grocery store. And he went to Springfield, Missouri to go through basic training.
Volunteers and draftees shed their civilian identities in basic training camps that united grocers from Kansas with mechanics from Monterey and bookkeepers from Brooklyn. Within 6 months, many would be sent to battlefields around the world, leaving behind parents, wives, and children.
I really adored my father. I mean, it was I admired him, I loved him, he was a wonderful father. And, the thought of life without him was, unimaginable to me. It was sort of the hand one was dealt, and your father was going to war in a good cause. And I was very proud of him.
We got married, and then he enlisted. His goal was to be a pilot on a B-24, and he achieved it. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant. He got his wings the same week his son was born. We were taught when your husband becomes an officer, you're an officer's wife. And you do not show any emotions when they go overseas. You hold it back no matter what, no crying. And we did that. It was tough, but we did it.
From an army of 300,000 in 1940, American armed forces would swell to 15 million. At the beginning of the war, there was considerable fear that these hastily assembled citizen soldiers could hold their own against a highly trained and heavily equipped enemy. News from the front had not been good. 3 months after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese had inflicted a series of humiliating defeats on an America whose confidence was shaken. On February 23rd, 1942, the president tried to calm and to rally a frightened nation.
This is war. The American people want to know and will be told the general trend of how the war is going.
The president had asked every American to follow his speech on a map.
I had huge maps on my wall from the backs of newspapers. I marked it with crayon, and I remember putting arrows and X's and circling towns.
We Americans have been compelled to yield ground, but we will regain it.
I remember his confidence and the tone of his voice and the closeness that you felt to him. He was a